Hello folks, my name is Jim Worthen. The show is Worthen One-on-One. We're here on Channel 17 Cox Cable, Mondays at 2 o'clock, Wednesdays at 5 o'clock, and Fridays at 7 o'clock. But that's just one platform, being many of you, probably most of you, are watching us on the internet. That's by going to TV Santa Barbara, the website for this station, and search on demand Worthen One-on-One. I keep complaining, can't they put me up toward the top? And they say it's alphabetical. I don't know if that's true. But then you can go otherwise to Vimeo and search Worthen One-on-One, and you'll see this show. You can share it with your friends that don't live right here, or your friends that have cut the cable and aren't on Cox Cable. I recommend they not do that because there's so many shows that you can record and watch on Fox and other of the broadcasts and the cable channels nationally that you really can't get them as easily on the internet. My guest today is someone I've known for years, going back into real estate. I've known his wife for years, going back into the Republican Party, and every show I learned something new, like that his wife was a CIA agent for 20 years. I didn't know that about her. We'll get into that. I guess is best known now for being the head of the Pierre Klein. I can't say it.
License like license.
Huh?
License like license.
Yeah.
Say what?
John Blankenship. Thank you for coming, John. I think instead of saying an old acquaintance, I hope it's a friend.
All right, absolutely.
John, every show we want to go through the person's biography, even though some guests say, I've said it 5 times. There's new people out there always.
Sure. Absolutely.
John, where were you born?
San Diego, California, the year 1942.
So you're not that old.
Yes, I am. I turned 80 next month.
I'm older than you, but
know,
don't tell anybody.
I know.
I lie about it all the time. I used to. I don't need to anymore. I know too much about the history, and I have great-grandchildren, so it's hard to lie about my age. Right. John, you grew up in San Diego?
Until I was 12. My father was I call a bomber factory guy. And in fact, he was a master riveter and taught Rosie the Riveter how to rivet. And he worked on B-24s and PB by Catalinas. And so at age 12, which would be 1954, Consolidated shut down, and my dad, then we moved up to L.A., Hawthorne.
So your dad was part of the home, like my dad was a home front building the arsenal of America.
Right, but he was drafted in 44, so he went in the Navy. Oh. So San Diego's all Navy, so.
Well, they wouldn't take my dad back. He had been gassed in the First World War, but he still wanted to come in.
Everybody wanted to.
They said, you have an infant, and you're almost 50. And you can't, and so he went and built Liberty ships at Mare Island.
All right.
And so there's some.
Everybody did something.
Yeah, everybody. I love the. I think it's Phoenix. It's one of the universities who is online a lot, mostly, who has a cartoonish girl studying at night, and she has a poster, Rosie the Riveter,
right.
And the slogan is "You can do it."
Right.
And she, after she graduates, changed it. You can do IT.
Sure. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. To change it around a little bit. Right.
Yeah, it's a great commercial.
Yeah.
So, at 12. Consolidated closed. Your
Right.
dad had been in the military and out.
Right.
Where did you go?
We went to Hawthorne, which is there in Los Angeles where all the aircraft plants were, North American, Northrop and Douglas, and everybody was in LA at that time. So
Yeah.
He got hired right on with North American. So
Back building.
yeah, more airplanes. Yeah. So the F-86 Sabres and things like that at that time, F-100s. So yeah.
So, and you had gone to school, elementary school in
San Diego, and then I ended up in the Hawthorne High School in 1950. What would it be 56?
play football?
Yes, I did. Everybody had to play football. I mean, wanted to play football.
That's right.
And one of my football mates was a guy named Brian Wilson, and the other one was Alan Jardine.
Yeah.
So I grew up with Brian at that time, and they ended up being the Beach Boys. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, if you didn't physically want to play football, there was a song. You gotta be a football hero to get along with the beautiful gals.
Yeah.
So you either went in because there were pretty girls, cheerleaders and stuff,
yeah.
or you really were an athlete.
Yeah. No,
What position?
I play quarterback. So
Oh,
what do you think?
you were the brains. I was the guy on the line trying
right.
to block.
Okay. No, I always wanted to be a quarterback. So my father wanted me to be quarterback, so that's what I did.
So after Hawthorne,
And then I was accepted to, I call it Berkeley and UCSB here, and a few other schools. But on my way to Berkeley, I stopped in
Berkeley?
Berkeley.
Yeah, Berkeley.
Yeah, that's what I call it. And I pulled up on the campus there at UCSB. This would have been in 1959-60, and never went north from there because it was the sunny day, surf was breaking about 3 feet, campus beach with about 12 girls in bikinis down there, and life was good.
They didn't have a football team then, did they?
No, not much.
Later
it was 2,972 students, so it was a very small school. Then it's now 23,000.
In the old Air Force.
No, Marine barracks.
barracks,
I
yeah.
stayed in the Marine barracks. That's where I was,
When I went out there still were some that we
you're
used.
still there now, yeah.
So UCSB,
Yeah.
and what was your family doing?
They unfortunately they had split up. The day I drove out to college, they drove out of the driveway in their cars and put a for sale sign on the house.
We've done our job.
Yeah, we've done our job. He's off, and it was one of those things. And they, went their separate ways. And
So you went to UCSB. Did you marry?
well, not then. I was, UCSB was a great place to be. I say there's 2,972 students, and there were 72 of us were males. 2,900 were co-eds. So it was in the Navy. They called it a target-rich environment. So that's what it was like.
Well, they were very attractive.
Yes,
as
they
you
were.
say.
Yeah, well, they were.
And the bikinis were bigger than they are now.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's really true. No, and they had been a teacher's school, when before it became UCSB.
Yeah.
So when it was up on the Riviera.
Right, where the
in the day.
Riviera Theater is now,
Right,
and that
yep.
whole campus.
Right.
I
Beautiful
remember
up there.
When I was early in real estate, I don't know if you remember this, there were a lot of fourplexes and houses divided into 5 units that had been the frat houses and the apartments for the students at the Riviera campus.
Oh yeah, right. Like the Delts were there and all that sort of, Delta Tau Delta and.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't move directly from there to the Marine, to UCSB. They went through what is now City College.
No, I think they did, Jim. They in '59 they moved down there. So it was 58 or 59 they moved. So I was like the 3rd year, and Isla Vista still had dirt roads.
Yeah.
They hadn't even, it was just starting to grow.
So how long did you go to UCSB?
I went there 4 years, but in 1963 I got my draft notice, and it said upon graduation you'll report.
Vietnam.
Well, it didn't say Vietnam in 1963. We didn't see Vietnam come on the paper until about 1965, and then it was on page 11.
Yeah, well, John Kennedy sent advisors.
Advisors. That's right.
And then the big campaign between Goldwater and Johnson was that Goldwater would get us into a big war.
Yeah,
He wouldn't have. But
my wife was at UCLA, and she worked on the Goldwater campaign. That was her first taste of politics. And of course, it was a landslide back then. So.
Well, and a not as nice a lady went in a different direction. Hillary Clinton was the Goldwater girl in Chicago.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so, but she found her way through Arkansas.
Okay.
So you got your draft notice.
Right.
Did you draft or did you enlist?
I went down, my roommates wanted to be Navy pilots, and they went down and tried out, and they both failed the eye exam. And I had just watched The Bridges of Toko Ri, which is about Navy pilots. Yeah. And of course, my father was a pilot, and my mother was a pilot. So I went down to Los Alamitos down in LA and passed everything, and he said, when do you want to come? So upon graduation, I was, that's what I had signed up for, is to go Navy Flight School in Pensacola, Florida.
Now, was Los Alamitos Navy?
Yes, it was.
Okay. I knew Miramar was, but
Right.
I didn't. Miramar was Marine, right?
Right, yes.
And Los Alamitos was Navy. That was a dirty, ugly military town with a lot of immigrants and horrible San Diego, and it got turned around.
Yes.
And became a tourist mecca. I always compared it to Oxnard, which was an ugly, dirty,
That's true.
military town that turned itself around and became. I used to go down there just to party.
Yeah.
They had some nice hotels on the beach.
Oh yeah.
So, what were you trained in?
Well, I was the first aircraft after you go through to get your commission, the 14 weeks I think it was, where you swim a mile every day and run 5 miles and obstacle courses and all that, and then take all the classes of which you try to keep your eyes open. You go on to what is called primary training, which was at Softly Field, and you fly, we then flew T-34, which was double place low wing monoplane. That's how we then got qualified to go where else we wanted to go.
So you weren't flying a Super Sabre?
No, they'd start you out in a pretty docile airplane.
Were you commissioned as a?
Yes, I was commissioned as an ensign in the Navy. Right. So.
Yeah, I always get confused. Ensigns are like.
Well, they're like second lieutenants.
Yeah,
in
in
every
the
other
Army or the Marine Corps,
and the Air Force.
Yeah. And at some point, admirals and generals are the same till you get to be Admiral of the Navy and General of the Army, 4 stars.
Well, yeah, I mean, a major is the commander no, the lieutenant colonel is a commander in the Navy. A light colonel is a major. I mean, and the lieutenant commander is a major, and then a Navy captain is a colonel. Same, the bird signal.
You weren't married then, were you?
No, I wasn't. I then got married though, a little bit after that, of being down there.
Yeah, my uncle, in 40 years of the Navy, never went above Chief Petty Officer.
Okay.
The reason was he had 4 kids, and he had to take such a cut in pay because of the support for the children to become an ensign or go up through the ranks.
Go commission, right?
Yeah. So he was a Chief Petty Officer for about 25 years. So you get trained.
Right.
NOM's going on. Describe, because I found it so interesting, what you were doing, flying out of Cameron Bay, as I recall.
Well, I end up out of Cameron Bay, but first in flight school you go, you do the primary, and then you go to basic training, which is at Whiting Field there, and you get another airplane called the T-28 Trojan, and then you fly that. I wanted to be an airline pilot at the time, I thought. So there were a group of us that wanted to not be on aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
So it's which you know, there's always that. They want you to be on the aircraft carriers. They like the, but the so we would go through that, and then you go on to advanced, which is go to Corpus Christi, Texas, and there you fly twin-engine, multi-engine airplanes. So that's the way to go. And so
back propeller drove it.
yeah, still propeller back then, and now they're. Then once you do that, you do your carrier quals in the T-28 on the Lexington, and you do 6 landings and takeoffs. And then at Corpus, you do with a multi-engine plane, which was an S2. You do 6 landings and takeoffs. So you get your carrier qual, and then you get to pick kind of where you want to go if you think you get to pick. I mean, they ask you what would you like to fly and where would you like to go, and I put down, I would like to fly anything that doesn't land on an aircraft carrier. What do you got? And they said, C-130s are P3s. And I said, I'll take either one. Where would you like to go? And I said, Rota, Spain. I'll take Sicily, Crete, somewhere in the Mediterranean. And that's when I got Cameron Bay. But I got the P3s, but it was just not where I wanted to go. And my friend that I flew with for all this time, he got C-130s out of Rota. And he saw a different Navy than what I saw.
Military never changes.
Yeah, no.
My sainted father said they would ask you, do you have a driver's license? And you'd say yes, and they'd give you a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, right. Or somebody without a driver's license, they'd give you a truck, right?
So, where were you first deployed?
First deployment, I picked up the squadron in Iwakuni, Japan. So that was our main, coming out of Moffett Field out of San Francisco was where we were home stationed, but the squadron was in Japan at that time. So I flew across the Pacific to, from Hawaii Midway to Wake Island and then into Japan.
Now, was Moffett inland, not
It's
at
at Mountain
Alameda?
View. Yeah, well, it's across the bay from Alameda.
Oh,
and
that's
it's where the
right.
big,
That's
big
where the
blimp hangars
blimps
are. Yeah,
yeah, on the peninsula, as we say.
right. There at
forgot that
Mountain
that
View,
was-
Sunnyvale, right.
Yeah.
So
Now you're stationed in Japan. You still haven't been shot at yet.
not yet, that I know of anyway. How's that? So, but
We're going to get back to big planes taking off from a carrier later in the show.
Okay.
Yeah, because even though you didn't want to get on a carrier and take off, there
no,
was
it's
some
9
guy-
months deployment on one of those big gray boats. Is 9 months, and I just didn't. I get
You
seasick.
never took off from a carrier?
Oh no, I did 12 carrier landings and takeoffs. So no, I did my quals. Every Navy pilot had to do that. So which was the time they washed out quite a few. But then once you've done that, then you get your wings and you could fly anything you want to fly.
Do you remember the name of the carrier?
Lexington, CV-16. How could I ever forget?
Yeah.
You fly out there and you look down at that little thing and it really looks small.
Why did I do this?
But they train you so much for it to be able to land on it that you just it's second nature by the time you get there.
I can remember as a teenager, the planes would practice coming into Alameda Naval Air Station, and they would take off from a carrier on the Pacific, and some of them would hit the coast range on the peninsula, wouldn't make it over to come to Alameda.
Right.
And so a lot of people don't realize that in most of our lives, more men and women died in practice and training than in combat.
Well, about 25%. I flew with one guy that I lost in training, but that's all that I saw. So pretty much everybody else. It's just that you start with 60, and then by the time you get your commission, you're down to about 30 people. So the attrition, not death or accidents, but just fail out of the program. So
sort of the real world of the movie with John Wayne, The High and the Mighty, which was a civil airplane trying to come into San Francisco. And so What was your first assignment to go into combat, and how did that work? It was very interesting the last time you told me.
Well, the P-3 is a anti-submarine aircraft and patrol bomber, if you will. It's 4-engine turboprop. My first mission in March of '68, we were taking off at 3 in the morning, which is dark 30. The Navy always takes off at dark 30. And we were heading up out of the Sea of Japan and on the Russian coast. It was what a typical patrol would be. And as we're droning along at 10,000 feet, the radarman comes up and says, I've got a contact. We were off of a place called Vladivostok. And we are on a red line. We fly 30 miles off the coast of Russia.
Siberia.
Yeah, Siberia, Russia. That was okay with them as long as we were 30 miles out. But the radarman comes up and tells I'm flying with a full commander and I'm flying co-pilot this time, and I've got a radar contact he just whispers to the commander 25 miles. So we would have to penetrate in 5 miles to see what this was, but he says a very suspicious contact. Well, we immediately dropped out of 10,000 feet to about 200 feet and went screaming in, and we got a hotel-class nuclear Polaris submarine on the surface. First time anybody had ever taken a picture of one, which was really
one of
exciting.
ours?
No, it was Russian. It was coming out of Russia on the surface, thinking he was safe until he got to 30 miles, then they would go down. Well, we caught him and got all these pictures. And later, my wife was CIA. She said went all the way through the agencies and everything to show these pictures that we took.
Now this was north of Korea.
Well, yeah, it's on. Russia goes around this way to then Korea, and it was on it was north of where we were flying. So, but we then took the pictures because we're not at war. And then sort of hightail it out of there and make sure that we got to the red line. And the radarman says, I've got 2 bogeys at 6 o'clock. Well, they had launched 2 MiGs at us. And this is my first mission, okay? And I'm going, holy moly. And the commander says, because I'm the new guy in the squadron, so he didn't even know my name. And I'm a Lieutenant JG then, and he said, Lieutenant, get us fighter support. Well, call Kadena. Well, Kadena's down in Okinawa, okay? Yeah. It would only take them maybe 3 hours to get to us. Here we've got 2 MiGs on the tail. Well, as we went screaming out of there, it's still at about 200 feet, they came by us like this. And
we were
going as fast as the best we could do is about 4 or something.
And they come by at
they're coming by at,
700.
they're coming by at 6. And just to let us know that if it had been a different time or at war, we were dead. So, but that was my first mission. And one of the funny things about it is the squadron I was in was VP-19. And the previous, from the Second World War through the Korean War till this, they had never caught a submarine on the surface, ever, okay? And after this incident, until it was decommissioned in the 80s, 1990, they never saw another. So my first mission was the only time the squadron ever, and I happened to be on it. Wow. And I thought, wow, this is what it's going to be like every day? Well, then.
Now you were on that tour investigating what was going on. You didn't go on around Korea to Vietnam. You turned back.
Well, we turned back that day because it pretty well shook us up. But our usual would be off of North Korea and off of Korea, period. We had a 50-yard. We moved to a 50-mile red line. But then they came out and they took the Pueblo and then they shot down an Air Force plane. So we moved out 75 miles because we didn't want them to come out at us. Because they shot it down. You know, they shot down an Air Force plane. So it killed everybody on board. So nobody wanted to go close to that place. So, because we didn't have any way to.
Were you able to further south to fly over South Korea?
We could go to South Korea, right? Yeah. So, and then then I think the next week or so that I was went down to, we flew down to Okinawa, and then we flew to the Philippines, Sangley Point, and then when we went into Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam. So that was kind of the standard. And we would rotate airplanes in and out of Cam Ranh Bay.
So your duty out of Cam Ranh Bay, now you're going into combat. What exactly were you doing? Looking for subs or what?
Well, no, there was people kid me all the time about how many North Vietnam submarines did you sink? And of course they didn't have one. But what we did was we went out always at about, get ready at midnight, and you take off at about 2 o'clock in the morning. dark 30 is Navy time. And what we would do is fly all the way down to the tip of Vietnam and back and monitor the sampans, because you've heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Yeah.
That's in the west of Vietnam. That was their supply line. The supply line for the east was these sampans, thousands of them. And they would run supplies and guns and ammunition and into the Viet Cong in the south. That's the only way they could supply them. But you're looking at, on a radar screen, probably 300 specks down there. They're all look the same. And until about 4 in the morning when they head into the beach. And they'll have a full-blown Chrysler engine in it or something. And it's just kind of floating along, and then boom, it heads in. And that's when we're supposed to zap them. So if we ever got shot at, it would have been, we didn't know. But
they didn't shoot back at you?
We didn't, no. They didn't want to do that.
But you engaged them?
Well, we always had a fighter cap of A4 Skyhawks that were, we call them scooters, that would just go get them. Because we lost a plane off of Cambodia that got in too close and took AA fire, caught on fire, and killed everybody on board. So it was a real terrible thing.
We aren't teaching geography like we used to, but there was a section where you said lost a plane over Cambodia. There were areas of Vietnam that weren't 100 miles wide.
Right.
And so it'd be very easy to all of a sudden, 20 minutes and you're in Cambodia.
Yeah. Well, these, we didn't go over inland. It was a crew that went, they were out over the ocean, but they had a radar contact in close into the islands. There's some islands off the south of Cambodia there, and they went in, and there they took the fire and they caught on fire. Mm-hmm. And nobody had ever ditched a P3 at this time. And they were trying to decide, here's a crew of 8 or 9 men, decide whether to ditch it or bail out. And as they decided they didn't want to ditch it because then maybe the bad guys would come and get them close into the islands, so they climbed to 10,000 feet and put on their parachutes, but nobody had ever parachuted before. Okay. So as they're thinking about that and being scattered all over God's creation, they decided to take it back down and ditch it. That's when the wing came them off, and they were all killed them. So they killed them all. So what happened then in Pax River back east, they took a P3 out on the Chesapeake and ditched it, and everybody walked out on the wings and had a cup of coffee, and that became the standard procedure after that, because it's easy to, it's like Sully did in the Hudson. You put down an airliner, you just put her down and open the hatches, walk out.
Nice long landing strip. It's water and cement.
Yeah, that's right.
If you do it right.
No gear. Yeah, if you do it right. Right.
Have to have a good pilot.
Yeah. So after that, they didn't allow them to go in close to the
airplane. Now, did the guys survive? And
they all died.
Oh.
So it's one of those tragic things.
So your main duty wasn't to engage and shoot up the sampans, it was to call in air support.
Right.
You were forward spotters.
Right, yeah. We would detect them because we had the radar array, so we could monitor all the sampans, and then we could give them direct the fighter right to it.
So 4 years?
5 years in the Navy.
5 years.
Now it's 11. If be a Navy pilot,
you came back, and of course the last training area was in Corpus Christi, so you wanted to go to Texas, right?
No, I did not. After being at UCSB and my then married wife, my first wife, we wanted to get back to Santa Barbara. My second tour of duty was Adak, Alaska, up in the Aleutians, and that was that's hard to, flying up there. The weather, yeah, because you've got ice runways and you've got just hellacious winds and blowing snow, and I mean it's something all the time. So crazy.
Yeah. I argued with a couple of people who knew better than I that we didn't really fight the Japanese in American land, but we had some real battles in the Aleutians.
Yeah, Kiska. Yeah. They that was part of the Midway operation when they went up there and occupied an island up there. So yeah.
So you come back to Santa Barbara, and you.
Well, I had a job offer, American Airlines, and it was Newark, New Jersey, for 3 years. And my first wife said, "Have a good time," and we decided to come back to Santa Barbara.
And the airlines don't start you with the big, beautiful planes.
No,
that fly.
and Newark was the bottom of the
puddle
pile.
jumpers.
Yeah, well, yeah, back then.
Commuter planes.
And all my friends that I flew with that went with United or Continental or Northwest or Southwest, all the different airlines, they then got laid off and for quite different times in there. So it was once I got here, I became very happy to be here.
So what did you do?
Well, a couple of my college roommates, we decided to build a spec house and bought a lot over on Sycamore Canyon for $7,580. So, and built a house.
Cost you $30,000-$40,000 to build it?
No, not that much. We got a loan, and the
almost 1970.
Yeah, 71, I think, by the time we found a lot and made an offer, and built a house that, his name was Harlan DeGroat. I don't know if you ever met Harlan. He was at UCSB with me, and Harlan hadn't gone to Vietnam. He went to SC and he got a degree in construction management, so in a master's degree. So he had been working for a big firm in San Francisco building the Bank of America building. And he said, boy, if I could get back to Santa Barbara, I'd build a spec house if I had $10,000, and I had $10,000. And I said, well, I've got $10,000. What's a spec house? And so that was
that's when you and Harlan began.
Harlan, we picked up another guy named Ed Holdren, who we've gone to school with. It's Holdren's Restaurant now.
Yeah.
And Harlan got a Sunset magazine of the house, about 2,300 square foot house, and he drew it on his paper out of the magazine, submitted that, and we had a permit within about a month, of all things. And they taught me everything that, from the foundation that they.
Good old days when the government entities really wanted housing. Yeah. They didn't want to charge a lot of fees for. They wanted you to build for people.
Yeah, well, it wasn't what it ended up being later on, but it was. We just had a great time. All the coffee and donuts.
Let me think. 71. Yeah, Goleta had about 5,000 or 6,000 people, and by 76, 78, it had 30,000.
Yeah, no, it was growing. Everything was growing. Yeah, in my senior year there at UCSB, I had a job with a construction crew cleaning up some of the tracks out there, making $3.50 an hour and having a crew of maybe 5 or 6 people, so that I was responsible for.
Any children?
Later, with my first wife, after 8 years of marriage, we had our one son. So, so we lived in Montecito, and he went to Laguna, which was a great school back then. But here we lived right next door to Montecito Union, but we drove our kid to Hopeless Ranch, I call it, every day to go to school along with other little kids. Good school, though.
Yeah, it's one of the tragedies of education, and there are many, is that we're not training young people for the trades. Everybody's got to go to college. Mm-hmm. Oh, and we'll loan you $100,000 to go.
No, he never borrowed anything. So he graduated from Santa Barbara High after Laguna for 8 years. He said, "Pop, I want to go somewhere where it's real, because here's these like 10 or 11 kids, the same kids from the time of first grade or kindergarten at Laguna." So then he wanted to go
Is
see.
he still alive? And
Oh yeah, no. Then he was accepted at the Air Force Academy. He had a he was a straight A student all the way through, very bright, 1563 on his SATs. So I don't know that he's my son with that kind of a score, but he then went to Air Force Academy for 2 years.
the new one in
In Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
And his eyes weren't good enough to be a pilot, and he wanted to be an astronaut. And so that's when he then got out and went to the University of California and graduated Phi Beta Kappa and got a scholarship to Columbia, University of New York.
Wow.
And got 2 master's degrees there. So
You must have had a very bright first wife. No, I'm kidding you.
She was. It's like the second one with Hazel. You know, she was magna cum laude at UCLA, and first wife. She was very bright too.
I first met Hazel, and I didn't know her history, but she was chairman of the Republican Party in Santa Barbara County,
Yeah.
and active in the Reagan era. And
Yeah.
so you're quite a historian. You have quite a collection of military memorabilia, and we're going to come up on, in this last 20 minutes, what we're doing on March 3rd.
Right.
Tell us first the outline of the people, and then we can get into some of the issues.
Okay. Well, Bill Brown, the sheriff, is a historian like I am, not by vocation but avocation, and then Rudy Willich, who is an
Soap opera Rudy. Soap opera Rudy.
Whatever you want to call it. Great English accent that I really like. We did, last September, we did the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. And Bill took the RAF and I took the Luftwaffe, and we had Rudy, do Churchill, the 3 speeches by Churchill during the war.
Was that at ChannelCity too?
Yeah, that's what I did.
I missed that.
I don't know how you did, but it was wonderful. We had 100 and some people there. We've done maybe 8 or 9 of these now, from fighter pilots and bomber boys, and we did Sands of Iwo Jima and Vietnam and the Forgotten War, Korea. I mean, we've done quite a few. And the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So ChannelCity likes us to do these, and we get a good draw. In fact, we had 400 something people for lunch when we did Iwo Jima. So, you know, because we got survivors of all these things. So anyway, we're going to do on March 3rd, Bill and I and Rudy, the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, the Doolittle Raid, and the Battle of Midway. So I call it the tragedy of Pearl Harbor, the revenge of the Doolittle Raid on Tokyo, 30 seconds over Tokyo, and then the victory within 6 months of the start of the war, where we battled Midway, one of the greatest naval battles in the history of over Trafalgar, Nelson at Trafalgar, or over Tojo over when the Japanese defeated the Russian fleet at Fujijima. Yeah, I'm having a hard time with my Japanese, but I think it's Toshima, and where they annihilated the Russian fleet in 1905. So anyway,
the Japanese defeated the Russians?
Yes, they did.
Is that what brought on that was the Russo-Finnish War?
Yeah.
And a young military officer, his father really, but they got the Pulitzer Peace Prize.
Well, Teddy Roosevelt, when he got
and the representatives were Douglas MacArthur and Arthur MacArthur. Really, Arthur MacArthur, right, his father.
Because that was what, early 1800s. So
now.
Early 1900s, I mean, sorry.
So we start out with Pearl.
Right.
How did we miss it?
Bill's going to take what the U.S. and what was going on. I'm going to take how Japan got there and how the decision was made, because it's a lot of people don't know that part of it. Everybody knows that we were attacked and we lost battleships and a lot of people.
Tora.
Tora. And so I don't want to show how the Japanese made a decision.
Did Tojo make that decision?
Well, he was part of it, Hideki Tojo, but it was really made by Yamamoto, and they finally came up with this plan. So it's a very, I mean, they came out with 6 carriers, and this was the first time where carriers just brought their force, and the ships didn't fire at each other. Basically, they came in and hit Battleship Row, and for them, the disaster was there were no carriers at the time, and that was the luck for us. And then the Japanese, even though they killed a lot of people and airplanes and the ships and all that, in fact, I lost one of our relatives, Theron Blankenship, was a pharmacist mate on the USS Arizona, and he's still entombed there. The other one was Henry Blankenship, and he's from Nebraska, and he was killed on the USS California that same day. So we lost 2 relatives.
Off camera, we were talking about the California Memorial in North Beach, San Francisco, on the other side of the Presidio.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if there are relics of it there, or but it's where that battleship, the California.
Yeah, California, the battleship, right?
Yeah.
And of course the Oklahoma and the Nevada and the Arizona and the West Virginia, it was a horrible mess. And of course, the naval battles before this had always been the battleships, the dreadnoughts, the big guys. And certainly the Japanese had some major battleships. In fact, they had the biggest one in the world at the time, the Yamato. Had 18-inch guns on it, so it was a fair. Our biggest were 16s. So,
yeah, our battleships, as we went through the war, they could throw a shell 40 miles, right?
No, well, ours could throw it about 28 miles. The Yamato could fire 32. The thing was, the shell was the size of a Volkswagen. It was a huge thing.
My cousin was on the Missouri, and supposedly he was in one of the turrets, and they fired, and he didn't get far enough away, and it blew his pants off.
Sure.
Is that conceivable?
Probably. I mean, I can't imagine that. You don't want to be around that thing when it fires. That's just huge. Those guns, even the 16-inch, they call them rifles. But
somebody's got to load them.
I
then
know.
You get out of the way.
Yeah, you get out of the way. I can't imagine. No, they did 4 of those of the Iowa class. The Iowa, which is down now in San Pedro, and then the Missouri, which I think is up in Bremerton, Washington, and then the New Jersey's back in New Jersey. I was aboard her, and then I don't know where the Wisconsin is right now, but there were 4 of them. But that was our biggest.
Murray's, of course, the Missouri's claim to fame is we made them sign the peace accords on the deck of the Missouri.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
and
with about 400 or 500 airplanes flying overhead, just to show them what we had done. Yeah. So.
Well, sadly, Hiroshima and Nagasaki took a lot of innocent lives, but also some American prisoners. And but it probably saved 2 million Japanese and maybe as many as 1 million Americans, because they would.
Well, they don't give up. They fight. Their history is that they've never been beaten, and that was a hard one for them. So, and they would have fought to the end if we had invaded.
So after Pearl, we were humiliated, particularly in the eyes of the Asians, and we had to do something to show that we weren't going to roll over. Right. I remember a book by Stilwell, who was the general in charge of the West Coast, saying that he had 5 bullets for each of his men, his military
soldiers.
Each soldier had 5 bullets.
Well, we were a tiny army.
We till after the Second World War, we didn't have a standing army. After every war, everybody mustered out except a few officer corps and
that's
a
it.
few,
Yeah.
you know, I mean.
It was a hard time between the First World War and the Second World War. I think we had an army of 200,000.
Yeah.
Was about all.
From almost 20 million, 200,000.
Well, we went to 16 million and 45.
And same thing after the Civil War, you know.
Oh, yeah.
A very famous man named Custer was a brevet general,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden he was a colonel,
Yeah.
you know, because he was regular army and he
Right.
was staying.
He was a brevet general, right?
Yeah. What did we do? What could we show them in the first few months? That
42 was Winston Groom, who did the book Forrest Gump, wrote that he called it the year that tried men's souls. And because here we were, devastated, a Navy, shocked and trying to switch over to a war footing, and all the men coming in, Army, Navy, and Marines, and then taking all the manufacturing and turning it into military, so that Ford was building Jeeps and tanks, and same way with all, you know, Chrysler or General
boat
Motors.
builder down in
New Orleans, yeah,
named Higgins.
That's right. Higgins started the boat.
10,000 landing craft.
Oh yeah, no, it was a major time, and people were really depressed because here we had just been shocked, and we were afraid. They thought we were going to be invaded on the West Coast. You know, we had the submarine off of right up above us here. At
Blackouts.
Yeah, and then they had drives for you give your pots and pans so they could melt down. Everybody's on rationing, no new cars, and everybody's going in. So
one of our family memorabilia is this little book about that big, only 2 pages, and it was a sugar rationing book for Jimmy Worthen, who was a 2-year-old.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and we had 24-hour surveillance of our people along the coast. I forget what they were called, but every volunteers who were looking out at the ocean and being the watchmen, and watchwomen.
Right.
So, what did we do?
Well, FDR called in Ernest King, who was the top admiral of the Navy that time. Ernest King, and asked what we could do, and George C. Marshall was there, and King says, well, let me call Hap Arnold. Now, Hap Arnold was Army Air Corps, head of the Army Air Corps, and they were just, can we strike back at Japan some way? And Hap Arnold said, I've got just the guy. His name is Jimmy Doolittle, and probably the finest pilot in the world at the time.
He wasn't a general at that time.
No, he was a major of all things. But Jimmy Doolittle was the top pilot probably in the world. And he had done the outside loop, first guy to do that. He had flown across the U.S. in less than 12 hours, the first guy to do that. He had run every race that there was, he had won. He was and had gone on and got a PhD from MIT in aeronautical engineering. So the guy was bright, and he was the master of the calculated risk. And so bring in Jimmy and they said to him, what could we do? And they sort of bounced around a little bit, thought, well, what about a bomber? Because the planes that we had for the ships on carriers couldn't fly the distance, and they needed something with distance. And Jimmy said, well, we've got B-26s and BT-13s and B-25s. And so they thought about it, but it came down to the B-25 had the shortest wings and the capability to modify it to get extra gas containers in it to fly 2,500 miles. And if they could get them on a carrier, their new carrier coming out right then was out of Norfolk. They had the USS Hornet, the CV-8, okay? And so guys flew the B-25s down there, threw 3 of them, and they put 2 of them up on the deck of the Hornet, went out 100 miles, and a guy took off. And the wing didn't hit the island. They were able to make it off. Because when you get that...
The conning
tower,
tower, yeah.
But the thing was that when you get a carrier doing 30 knots, because she would do close to 30, and then you get that wind over the deck, and then you get all the power, that thing's almost flying before you would let go of the brakes. And so they felt like this was the thing, and they went from there. I mean, he took it and got, they could figure they'd get 16 of them on there, 5-man crew.
Now, what part of this does you and Brown and Wood?
Well, I'm going to do the Japanese plan at the beginning, with Rudy doing the Art of War, 500 BC, the guy that wrote the book of the Art of War. Shinsu. And then I will take the Japanese plan of how they got there. And then Bill wants to talk about how we were unprepared, but then what happened. And so we kind of bounced around.
Bataan and the other?
Well, yeah, because we lost Wake Island and we lost Guam, and they came into the Philippines. And it was a horrid time for us. And we couldn't do anything about the Philippines and Martin MacArthur. But then Rudy will do FDR's speech to Congress on December the 8th about the Day of Infamy. So, and then what Churchill had to say, because Churchill's really, after Pearl Harbor, and we declared war on Japan, then Hitler and Mussolini declared war on us on December the 10th. And Churchill said, "We have just won the war." And because with America, there was no doubt in his mind. It was just a matter of time.
So all this that we're skimming right now, you'll spend an hour plus at on this 20 minutes or 15 minutes that we're taking. So as much as I think I know about history, December, Pearl Harbor.
December 7th.
8th, of course, Roosevelt went right in and declared war, and the Congress declared war on Japan. When did we declare? Then right away, Germany and
it was a couple days later. But Hitler stupidly, one of the terrible, dumb mistakes that he made.
And when did we declare war on Germany?
The next day.
Oh, okay.
So,
not like today where they filibuster.
No, it was going. There was only one vote in Congress against the war. It was a woman from Wyoming, of all things, but that was the only vote. So and it started. It was a crazy time.
So you got these 5 guys and 16 planes.
So 80 guys total, all volunteers.
And what kind of bomb load?
Well, they could only carry about 1,000 pounds. So they had 2 500-pounders, and
the rest was fuel.
Everything had to be fuel. They took out machine guns and all sorts of things out of the airplane to lighten them, and then put in fuel cells and even jerry cans so that they could get that range. Because the plan was to get...
Did they hit Tokyo?
Oh yeah, they did. But the thing was that they wanted to get within 400 to 500 miles. Is where they thought they would launch, because that would be only about an hour to 2 to get over Tokyo, and then they would have enough fuel to make it to well into China. At first they wanted to go to Russia, but Russia wouldn't have any part of it because they didn't want to anger the
Russia didn't declare war on Japan until 3 days.
45,
yeah.
So they didn't want to anger they had enough trouble with Hitler on the Western Front for them. They didn't want to anger the Japanese, so they told us no. And even though one aircraft goes there,
Well, we're going to leave the part of what happened to those pilots to people come to the ChannelCity Club. Now tell me about, we've got 4 minutes for Midway.
Okay. Well, the Japanese, Yamamoto is their genius. He's head of the Navy, and Navy's extremely powerful. They decide, because they missed the carriers, that they've got to do a climactic battle that will sink America's carriers, because that will cause us at least a year before we can come at them. He was afraid of the power that we had of the industry and so on about coming after the Japanese. But
Arsenal of the democracy.
yeah, well, it was going to be, so they came up with this ingenious, very complex plan, which the Japanese are famous for, of trying to, they had 140 ships, their entire navy coming at us, and they have this thing going to the Aleutians where they take the carriers up there and troops to hopefully get us to go that way. And it was all very secret, of course, but we had broken their code.
They thought we'd go to defend Alaska. Didn't
yeah,
they?
Right.
It wasn't even a state. Who cares?
Yeah, well, there's nobody up there. Because I was stationed there was nobody there. Anyway, the part was that then we would attack Midway with this huge fleet, and they would have, they attacked Pearl Harbor with 6 carriers, but they would, Midway there were 4, and a huge amount of all the other ships that they had, 140 ships coming out there. And so the battle comes, and Yamamoto doesn't talk to the main commander of the carrier fleet about his suspicion that there may be American carriers that could come. And Nagumo, which was the admiral of the carriers, hasn't been told this. He attacks Midway like it was supposed to, and first wave they bomb him and all that kind of thing. And
now this was an island that he was
yeah,
attacking.
I've been on Midway. It's
Navy.
nothing there. It's just a tiny place with some Goonie birds on it. But they thought that would draw the American carriers out. It's one way or the other. They were going to get their whole Navy to tackle our carriers. We had 3. Well, here come the 3 carriers with Nimitz. We had broken the code and set the ambush up. And then it was, it was an amazing time. But basically in 2 minutes, we sunk 2 carriers, and then we sunk the other 2. So it basically almost
broke their back.
It broke their back. They could never come back from that. It was only a matter of time. That's in 6 months.
Did we lose?
We lost the Yorktown.
The what?
The Yorktown. That's where she went
Yorktown,
down. Yeah, finally got at us. Had they got at us early, we could have lost. It could have been reversed. But it all ended up on timing and who found who. And
Nimitz the main admiral?
well, he was the one that planned it.
Yeah.
But Spruance and Halsey was supposed to go, but it was Spruance and Fletcher that went out there. And boy, what a battle! It was really something. And we had these old torpedo planes, a Devastator, that with torpedoes that were so defunct, they were hit the ship and they...
People are going to have to come to the ChannelCity Club to get this
all the details
beefed out. Will you take questions?
Oh, sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, John, we're out of time.
Oh,
and we could have gone on for more time than you'll even have at the... by the way, our Master of Ceremonies, our former Assemblyman, our former
Brooks
Supervisor,
Firestone.
Brooks Firestone. So we'll see you there.
All right. Hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you.